Way, way before any European ships even dreamed of crossing the Atlantic, the Americas were home to millions of people, living in some of the most advanced civilizations on the entire planet. Today, we're going to dive into the story of three of these absolute giants: the Maya, the Aztec, and the Inca. We're going to see how they built their incredible worlds and what exactly led to their collision with another and their dramatic fall. Just look at this map. We're talking about huge territories, incredibly complex societies, and cultures that totally dominated their landscapes for centuries. The Aztec, the Maya, the Inca, each one was an absolute powerhouse. But, and this is key, they were all built on fundamentally different blueprints for how to hold on to power. And for two of them, that very blueprint, the thing that made them so mighty, also contained a fatal flaw, a weakness that would be brutally exploited when outsiders finally showed up on their shores. All right, so let's properly meet these American giants. Deep in the rainforests of Mesoamerica, you have the brilliant but, let's say, disunited Maya. A bit further north in the high valley of Mexico, you have the incredibly powerful Aztec. And then, stretching all the way down the spine of South America, you've got the massive and super organized Inca Empire. Each one was basically a world unto itself. And talk about different worlds. These guys couldn't have lived in more different places. You've got the Maya, who completely mastered life in these dense, humid rainforests. The Aztec, they built their capital city on a lake of all things, in a super high-altitude basin. And then the Inca, they engineered their entire society across the rugged, seriously unforgiving Andes Mountains. This geography wasn't just scenery, it shaped everything about them. Okay, so geography is one thing, but the real story, the part that's going to matter most, is how you organize an empire. How do you rule it? That's the blueprint. And this is where our three giants went down completely different roads with wildly different results. Okay, now this is the key to the whole story. The Aztec and the Inca were super centralized. Think of them like a giant corporation with a single powerful CEO in the capital city, ruling over a huge unified territory. They made everyone pay tribute. The Maya, on the other hand, they were totally decentralized, more like a bunch of independent competing franchises that were constantly fighting each other for resources. And this single difference, unified versus fragmented, is going to turn out to be the most important factor in their survival.
And just to understand the level of genius we're talking about, think about the Aztec capital. It had over 200,000 people, which was massive for the time, and it was built on a lake. So how in the world do you feed all those people? Well, you invent chinampas, or what we call floating gardens. These are literally man-made islands of super fertile soil that could produce food all year round. It's just an absolutely brilliant solution to a huge problem.
The Inca, meanwhile, had a totally different problem. Their empire stretched for 2,500 miles. How do you manage all that with no written language? Seems impossible, right? Well, they had this, the quipu. This amazing system of knotted, colored strings was basically their version of a supercomputer. It let them keep crazy detailed records, track populations, and manage the empire's resources with incredible precision, all with knots on a string. And of course, we can't forget the Maya. Now, they may have been politically divided, but their intellectual achievements were just staggering. We're talking one of the most complex writing systems in the ancient Americas, and get this, they independently came up with the concept of zero. That is a massive intellectual leap. It allowed them to make unbelievably accurate calendars and track the stars, but all that brainpower was fragmented, which, as we're about to see, would mean their story of conquest would play out very differently. So you've got these three incredibly sophisticated, powerful, and innovative worlds all doing their own thing. And then, in the early 1500s, everything changes. The arrival of Spanish conquistadors triggers a violent, dramatic turning point in history, a true collision of worlds. But what's really shocking is just how fast it all fell apart. I mean, look at this. 1519, Cortez lands in Mexico. Just 2 years later, 2 years, the mighty Aztec capital is a smoking ruin. A little over a decade later, Pizarro captures the Incan emperor and basically cuts the head off the entire empire in one move. How could these superpowers just collapse so quickly? The simple story we always hear is about gungs, germs, and steel. And yeah, those were definitely important, but they don't explain the sheer speed of the collapse. The real decisive factor, the secret weapon, was something much more strategic: alliances. The Spanish absolutely did not conquer these empires alone. So this brings us back to the central mystery. It just seems impossible, right? A few hundred soldiers go up against massive, battle-hardened armies of millions. The math just doesn't add up. But the answer isn't just about what the Spanish had with them. It's about the political situation they stumbled into when they arrived.
So there were really three key factors at play here. The first two are the ones we all know. The European weapons, steel swords, cannons, horses, were a shock. And the invisible weapon, European diseases like smallpox, was absolutely catastrophic. But even those two things weren't enough. The third factor, that was the real game changer: strategic alliances with other indigenous groups.
And we really can't overstate the impact of disease. Smallpox, measles, the people here had zero immunity. We're talking about epidemics that just ripped through cities and armies, killing millions and shattering their societies, sometimes before they even saw a single Spanish soldier. It was basically an unintentional but unbelievably effective form of biological warfare. And right here is where those imperial blueprints come crashing back into the story. That centralized power of the Aztec and Inca, it turned out to be a huge vulnerability. The Aztec system of demanding tribute from everyone they conquered meant they had a lot of enemies. So when Cortez showed up, he found people like the Tlaxcalans who were more than ready to join him. And Pizarro, he got incredibly lucky. He arrived to find the Inca Empire already tearing itself apart in a brutal civil war. The Spanish didn't create these cracks, they just walked right into them. And this is a really crucial point. Groups like the Tlaxcalans were not passive victims who got tricked. They were sharp, active political players. They saw the Spanish and their weird weapons as an opportunity, a powerful tool they could use to finally defeat their old rivals, the Aztecs. They made a calculated, strategic choice. So in a way, the fall of the Aztec Empire wasn't just a Spanish conquest. It was also a massive indigenous civil war. And the Spanish were just one of the players.
The result of all this wasn't just the fall of a few empires. It was the complete reshaping of two continents. The legacy of this conquest was absolutely profound, and its effects are still being felt all across the Americas today.
The consequences were simply catastrophic. Entire empires gone. Millions died from diseases. Whole populations were displaced from their ancestral lands. And in their place, a new colonial system called New Spain was built, one designed specifically to extract wealth and ship it across the ocean. For the Americas, a new and incredibly painful chapter had begun. So while this is a story about technology and disease and military strategy, at its heart, it is a story of division, and it leaves us with one powerful, lingering question. What if? What if those deep-seated rivalries hadn't been there? If the peoples of these great empires had somehow faced the invaders as one? How differently might our world look today?